all you Splinterheads, welcome back. If you're new here, thanks for dropping by. Bronze Dragon here with a bit of what I consider important information about the upcoming Land 1.5 drop. It's a piece of, it's a discussion topic that some people have been talking about lately, but I don't think people have really dove in deep enough on the subject to get a really good idea. Shout out to Aftersound because I was watching his video earlier and he was talking about the production of grain, and he's really good at going into numbers and such. I'm usually not the numbers guy. I usually leave that to Aftersound, Gathering the Magic, Cryptmancer, especially Cryptmancer. They're all good with numbers. I usually leave that alone because a lot of that is speculation. Now, in this case, we have the white paper, the Secret of Praetoria white paper, and there are some hard and fast formulas. Now, and I'm going to go by those formulas. So you may ask yourself, what are we talking about? Before I tell you, I'm going to ask you to give me a thumbs up. And if you're getting into this video and it's presenting you with some worthwhile information, please subscribe. That's all I ask. With that said, I want to talk about food. No, not that day-old pizza you just had out of the refrigerator, or no, that hamburger you just pulled off the grill. I'm not talking about that. I'm not even talking about one of those weird videos you see on TikTok of somebody cooking a steak on their sidewalk or something or other. I'm talking about the food in Praetoria. Now, we've all heard about it. Starting out, it's going to be grain, right? And if you've read through the white paper, you know what I'm getting ready to tell you. But I'm willing to bet that most people have not sat down and read through most, if not all, of the white paper. And I'll take a minute here and say that if you're investing in land, I would say you should sit down. I think it maybe took me a half hour, if that, to read through the white paper and absorb, because there's lots of numbers. They've padded this as time has went along. I can't talk tonight. With a lot of basically propping up, trying to give value to DEC and SPS. But what that means to us end users is more costs. So what I really want to get across is what to expect with your land, if you've bought land, if you've invested in land. And this is a wide-ranging discussion, right? But I just want to pick out one small piece of this whole big discussion and just kind of drill in depth. And like I said, I started thinking about this and it's kind of been eating at the back of my brain after watching Aftersound, his video earlier, talking about grain, the production of grain and such, and how he was thinking about, he wasn't talking about really making any moves, but he was theory crafting. That's a good way to put it. So the way we'll start off with, and I don't know how long this video is going to be. I've been trying to make my videos shorter, but I've also think that this is very valid information and hope that it brings value to you. So let's start off in the white paper. This is where we're at. We're on the food section. And they mentioned, and this has been talked about before, okay? They mentioned that each worker will consume 0.01 grain per base production point, or PP, that they provide per hour. Okay, that's the basics, okay? And we're going to use that basic math and go by the common, I've got some examples here because I've got some real life examples I'm getting ready to throw at you because I'm in the situation where I just surveyed land. I know what I have now, and I needed to figure out what characters, what cards I wanted to put on that land. So in the last few days, I've been trying to buy a few cards specifically for that purpose because if you haven't watched the market, cards are going up. It's having the exact what everybody's been talking about, it's happening. So I don't want you to FOMO. I want you to consider your card buying wisely. And this video isn't about what cards you're going to buy. This is more about how you're going to feed them and what it's going to cost you. So let's go ahead and get into this. I made up a small slide presentation. Okay, here we go. Now I want to start off by saying everything I figured here are straight equations, no boosts taken into account, which would increase everything exponentially, such as titles, totems, runes. There are several things within the white paper that could increase your production, and also when you increase your production, you're also increasing how much you have to feed those characters, those cards, right? So, and I also wanted to say that this is based on today's value of DEC on April 13th, 2023. As we know, it fluctuates. It's been holding pretty steady, and it's been hanging in there, right, and going up. It's almost a peg. I think everything that's been going on has been putting it in the right direction, just like they planned it, right? But it highly fluctuates. So if you're taking action on the numbers that I give today, if you take them in 3 days and they're different, don't be surprised. Okay. Thirdly, as I always say, this is not financial advice. I'm not trying to push it one way or the other. I'm just trying to give you some information. If you're investing in land and if you're buying cards to stake on that land, what to expect as far as food costs for those characters. Okay. And one other thing I didn't figure into is because there's a few different layers of taxes that you will be taxed on this and that, things you produce and buy in the game. And those go to the keeps and castles and such. I did not figure those in. So you're going to have to figure in a plus or minus of about 15% to these figures we're looking at, right? So they're not going to be exact. This is just meant to get in the ballpark. And like I said, I'm not the best numbers guy, but this interested me in such a way that I couldn't wait to get home from work to kind of dive into these numbers to get them across to you. Okay. Okay, this is the second slide. I had a little bit of technical difficulties. This is only the second time I've done a slideshow here, so hope you like the slides. It was easier than reading like a Word document or something. So, okay, so this is my specific example for you. This is the situation I was in. I'm not saying it's the best decision for cards, and I'm not saying going out and buying these cards. But in my situation, I had a lake, and I found that I needed to either put water or earth cards on the lake. They both get plus 10%. Okay, it's the first thing you have to do when you're deciding your cards. Find out what type you need to put on there. Okay, anyway, I decided upon 2 regular foil Jin Oceanus, 2 regular foil Jin Bilka, because mainly they're cheap. They're the cheapest, some of the cheapest variety, right? Not the cheapest. Jin Bilka is, but not Jin Oceanus. I bought Jin Oceanus because, frankly, it's one of my favorite cards, and just give me an excuse to buy another one, I'll buy another one. But anyway, so with these 2 particular cards, they were about $22 a piece, and I'm talking about max level. So there's 4 BCX, they're legendary. So 4 BCX is max level. So they're $22 a piece, $44 for the 2. And each one gives me 1,500 production points. So for each of those 2, I get 3,000 total, right? The Jin Bilkas, very similar. They were a little bit cheaper. They were $6 a piece as of today's numbers, and they net me another 3,000. Okay, production points per hour. And the third one, I splurged. I bought a beta frozen soldier. It says ×1, but that's a maximum rare, maximum level rare, and that was 115 BCX. Today's price on that's $95. But with beta, if you consult the chart, you get a multiplier of 5. So just right out of the gate, rare was 1,100 I think that's just 1100. I mistyped that. It's 1100, not 1110. And the 5 times is for being a beta. So that grants me 5500 production points per hour. All totaled for those 5 cards, 11,500. Now, I'm not saying this is the best. I'm just saying that that's what I came up with, and this is my example. So now, using the math we talked about earlier, 0.01, okay, per production point. I just did that simple math, and that nets me 115 grain per hour that I have to provide for my cards, okay? While they're doing their business, while they're mining, whatever they're doing on my land, 115 grain per hour. That comes up with 2,760 per day, okay? Now, they also stated that right off the bat, grain bought off not off people, because keep in mind, at first, when we're clearing land, you can't buy grain off people. You'll have to buy it off of the game. And that's going to be 1 DEC per grain, okay, per unit of grain, okay? Figured in today's values, that's $2.49 US per day. This is for 5 characters, or 5 cards on one land, $2.50 US per day. And these aren't even high level. I mean, the Frozen Soldier Beta is the best. The other ones are not. You can look on in the white paper, they provide some other formulas, because obviously they want you to buy all the expensive cards, right? And I mean, if you want to go top end and you got the money, go for it. But keep in mind that these the formula stays static. The numbers go up. The more you produce, the more you have to feed them, the more you're paying per day to get that production. So just keep that in mind. Now, I did one other example because this is kind of an example that Gathering the Magic and I were talking about on my most recent Saturday morning stand-up video. He decided, and he did a video, and like I told you earlier, he's better at the math than I am, but he found that gold foil legendaries present the best value, for PP, production points. Now, you can go watch his video and ask him questions on that. I don't have the details, but I know that that was the one point he brought up. So I took that and I just kind of extrapolated it out, and I'll have him comment in the comments on this video if I've got it wrong, because if I've got it wrong, I'm sorry. But so what I figured is 5 gold foil single BCX from Chaos Legion, from the Chaos Legion era. So legendaries. So these are the newest legendaries, gold foil, basically the cheapest legendary gold foils you're going to get, right? Okay. Once again, Jin Bilka, Harclaw, Legionnaire Alvar. Okay. Now, each one of the Jin Bilkas was $70. But each one of those give you 2,500 production points for a total of 5,000. Same thing with Harclaw. There wasn't a whole lot of price difference between the two, a couple bucks per BCX, but you can see the math there. Between those two, that gives you 10,000. Okay, the Alvar, just for a little bit of difference, gives you another 2,500. Was in the same ballpark, $73. So we're talking 1,200 or 12,500 production points, which is 1,000 more than my original example. This would take 125 grain per hour, or 3,000 grain per day, and roughly the math goes up to $2.75 US. Okay. So as you can see, this just kind of points out my example. As you put better cards on there, you're making more production for whatever you're, mining, making, chopping wood, whatever you're doing. You're making more, but you're also going to have to pay more. Now, like I mentioned up front, after the game gets going, after the land is cleared, which I have some more figures on that. After the land is cleared, then you will have the option to start producing your own grain or buying your grain off of other people. They also stated that the 1 DEC per grain unit is kind of a worst case example, because as people start producing grain and selling it on the market, you should be able to get it for cheaper. So keep that in mind with the math. I'm talking up front for the first 2 or 3 weeks of the game, what to expect, okay? So you can also expect that if you decide to have your land produce grain, their math showed that you can roughly make whatever you produce, you're roughly going to eat through half of it with the cards on your plot that are producing the grain. The other half is taxed, or the whole is taxed, but then half of that you're eating and the other half you can sell it or whatever. It's also worth mentioning that right up front, there until I believe land phase 2, you can have unlimited grain on each plot. Part of land phase 2 is going to be the fact that they're going to start instituting limits and a different gameplay mechanic where to store grain. So, but that's not, it was just worth mentioning. So let's go back to what I was talking about. My next slide, and I don't have a ton of slides. This isn't like a big meeting or anything, but hey, Splinterheads, future Bronze Dragon jumping in here while I was editing the video. I realized this slide does not make a lot of sense because I put the word common before each of the rarities. What I really meant was I was referring to this clearing plots in the white paper, this page. And what I really meant was common, rare, epic, legendary. I did for some reason, I don't know, I prefaced each with common, like common, rare. I don't know. I was thinking about the difference between natural, magical, and occupied, but it didn't come out right. So back to the video. Probably to clear the plot. And I say probably because there's a lot of math involved and there's a lot of variables. But what I went through, and I figured this example with my initial example of 11,500 points, production points with the characters I chose. And I figured it out for just common. Now, if you go up to the varying rarer lands, they exponentially take more to clear. Longer, read, also more food, etc. So the costs go up and it's going to take longer. So a common, natural plot takes 1.5 million, 5.5 days with my 11,500 pp per hour. That's roughly $13.75 worth of food, US. Okay. Common rare, 6 days, $15 worth of food. Common epic, 7.5 days, $18.75 worth of food. And common legendary, 11 days, $27.5. Okay, and these are just common. They're not even talking about the magical or the other ones. They take, you can look in the white paper, they take a lot more. Okay, so I'm just throwing this at you because this is another cost associated with each land you have. Okay, you have to get through clearing that land before you can do anything with it. Okay, so let's move on. So I guess that was my last slide. Let's go back to okay, that's about it. But there's a few little tidbits that I wanted to throw in here that's not really related to the price of grain and what you're going to pay, but it's kind of a side notes on grain. The first one is the internal market. Under the miscellaneous section of the white paper. So basically, they're going to create a DEC and grain liquidity pool. Okay, and basically, they don't have a whole lot of details here, but it's going to theoretically provide somebody a liquidity pool that you can get into if you choose, say, for instance, to have several plots of land producing grain, and you want to go into a liquidity pool with grain and match that with DC. That's going to provide the liquidity for people to buy and sell grain within the game, right? And they mentioned that this is really the only way that I know of and that you can make DEC in the game now, other than buying and selling, right? So that's worth noting. The other thing I wanted to note is transportation, okay? So the grain usage is figured on an area basis. In other words, if you are in one area, I just want to go over to the land and go to the map. So if you are in the pristine Northwest and you're producing grain, any of your lands, and my guild chat is going crazy, any of your lands within the pristine Northwest can check against the grain you're producing there. So you can have a plot over here, a plot over there, as long as it averages out. If I'm reading the white paper right, as long as it averages out and you're producing enough, then it will remove the grain when you do a harvest. It says, okay, so you've got 10,000 worth of production points. You owe 10,000 grain, just throwing a number out there. You've actually produced 20,000 grain, so it takes the 10,000 out of what you have before it charges you for anything, if you need to be charged for anything. And the reason I mention this is because if you have a land and it's outside, say you have a land in Broken Lands that you're producing grain, and you want to transfer that grain to the pristine Northwest, guess what? There's going to be another charge. They've talked about this before. It all has to do with transportation. There's going to be taxes on it as well. The whole idea is you have to transport that grain. So that's another peg behind the idea that we've been talking about of kind of consolidating. Now, I'm not saying, consolidating in one area. I'm not saying one way or the other. In fact, my original idea was to have my land spread out. But as the game has evolved and as they've put together more, fleshed out the idea of land more, I'm more and more coming to the point where I want to be consolidated in one area, or maybe two areas, depending upon how much land I have. And that's another point. I was thinking about buying more lands, but once I started seeing all these costs involved by reading through the white paper, I'm thinking about I'll just maybe stick with my 3 plots. So with that said, let's go back to the white paper. Transportation and bridging is worth checking out. The harvesting, I kind of touched on that. You can harvest really as often as you want. I think they said once per hour, or as little as once per week. If you make any changes to the cards you have staked, that's going to cause an automatic harvest, because then the math changes, right? If you change one card to another, the math is most likely going to change, so they want to go ahead and harvest it, and then you start over. And at that point, it's going to check for the grain you need to pay for your workers and et cetera. So I think we've went in pretty deep on this. And obviously there's probably 100 things that I didn't mention here, and there's a lot of other things within the white paper that I was surprised by. A lot of stuff I had heard, but I didn't have details on. So with that said, if you have any questions, maybe I can touch upon them in a future video. Put them in the comments below. Drop by and check us out on, I have the Saturday morning stand-up at 11 Eastern. And we go live for an hour, sometimes a little bit more if we have a lot to talk about. We talk about Splinterlands, what's happening in Splinterlands. We talk about what's happening in Splinterforge, and whatever else is the topic of the day. As long as it's Splinterlands related, it's on the books. So with that said, this is Bronze Dragon bringing you food talk I hope you all are happy and healthy, and I will see you on the flip side.